Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready for
Yeah.
another deep dive. Today we're going down a rabbit hole of urban legends. But not just any urban legends. These are the ones that turned out to have, well, let's just say, some seriously strange true stories behind them. We're talking haunted houses, creepy figures lurking in the shadows, even a muscle-obsessed man. Oh, and you got to hear this nickname. They call him Purple Aki.
Seriously, some of these stories you send in, Wild doesn't even begin to cover it.
Right. I mean, who knew truth could be so much stranger than fiction?
You know what they say, fact is often stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
And the stories we're diving into today are a perfect example of that.
Okay, so let's jump right into it with a story that takes us all the way to Tasmania, Australia. Picture this. It's a seemingly normal house in West Hobart, except people are saying it's haunted. Classic spooky stuff, right? But here's where things take a turn. Instead of ghosts, the source of all the weird stuff happening in this house was something completely unexpected.
A plant.
Yeah, a plant.
Datura, to be exact. It's this fascinating but crazy dangerous plant, part of the nightshade family, like belladonna.
Okay, so we're not talking about your average backyard weed here.
Not even close. Datura has a long history. Different cultures around the world have used it for rituals, even medicine. But even in small doses, it can do a number on you.
What do you mean do a number on you?
Hallucinations. Vivid and often absolutely terrifying hallucinations.
So people were tripping out in this house and just thought it was haunted.
It's more complicated than that. See, this family in Tasmania, they had no clue they were even ingesting the stuff. Apparently, a datura vine had grown up into the trees above their house. And get this, it was dropping leaves into their rainwater tank.
Hold on, you're telling me they were accidentally poisoning themselves with their own rainwater? Talk about a bad hair day?
That's one way to put it. But what's wild is, this kind of thing, accidental datura poisoning, it's more common than you'd think. People mistake it for other plants and...
Who knew rainwater could be so dangerous? Okay, you ready for another urban legend turned true crime nightmare?
Hit me with it.
All right, this one takes us to Staten Island, New York. Back in the 1970s, the legend was all about this creepy figure. They called him Cropsy.
Oh, I know this one. He was going around snatching children, right, like a
Yeah.
boogeyman story.
Except this time, the story gets way more disturbing because it gets linked to a real person, a guy named Andre Rand.
Yeah, and while Rand wasn't going around with a hook hand like in the stories, his actions were definitely the stuff of nightmares. Starting in the early 70s, kids started disappearing on Staten Island, vanishing without a trace. And Rand, he was often the last person seen with them.
Can you imagine the fear that must have gripped those families? It's like something straight out of a horror movie, but this was real life.
And for years, it was just this unsolved mystery, this dark cloud hanging over the community.
It's crazy how these urban legends, they often tap into our deepest fears, like the fear of the unknown, the fear of what lurks in the shadows. And sometimes those fears, they're not so far from the truth. Speaking of fears, our next story takes us to what seems like a peaceful, idyllic place, North Pond, Maine. Picture this. Beautiful cabins nestled in the woods, serene, tranquil, the perfect getaway. But this is the deep dive, so there's got to be a twist, right?
There's always a twist.
Well, for decades, starting back in the 80s, people who owned cabins in this peaceful community, they'd come back from trips to find things missing. Food, tools, toiletries, just gone. They called this mysterious thief the North Pond Hermit.
What always got me about this story is that it wasn't just a random thief passing through. We're talking about someone who lived completely off the grid, surviving solely on what they took from these cabins for decades.
Decades. Like multiple decades.
You heard right. In 2013, this legend of the North Pond Hermit, it took a very real turn when they finally caught the guy. His name was Christopher Thomas Knight, and get this, he had been living in the woods, completely isolated, for over 27 years.
27 years. I can't even imagine going 27 days without talking to someone. What drove this guy to live like that, and how did he even survive that long, completely cut off from everything?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What makes someone choose that level of isolation? It's like a real-life mystery, right?
Yeah, it really is.
It is.
It makes you think about the balance between our need for connection and that pull towards solitude. Okay, now let's talk about Purple Aki, because this story, it's equal parts bizarre and unsettling. So picture this. It's the 1980s in Northwest England, and rumors are flying about this massive bodybuilder, like seriously jacked.
And they call him Purple Aki.
Right, Purple Aki. Now, I know what you're thinking, a bodybuilder with a funny nickname, what's so strange about that? But here's the thing, Aki had this habit. He'd approach these muscular guys, and he'd want to touch their muscles.
We're not talking a quick handshake or a pat on the back here.
Oh, no. This
Ugh.
was full-on, prolonged squeezing, asking guys to do squats, even wanting them to pose for him.
Yeah, I can see why people found that a little unnerving.
A little. They'd be running for the hills. But it goes beyond just being a little eccentric, right?
Definitely. It brings up this whole issue of social boundaries. What might seem harmless to one person can be super unsettling to someone else. And in Aki's case, his behavior took a dark turn in 1986 with the death of a 16-year-old boy named Gary Kelly.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The story goes that Aki followed this kid asking to touch his muscles. Kelly, understandably creeped out, he ran away. And in a desperate attempt to get away from Aki, he jumped onto some railroad tracks and was electrocuted.
That is tragic.
Absolutely heartbreaking. And while Aki was convicted of manslaughter, his sentence was later overturned because there wasn't enough evidence to directly link him to Kelly's death. But even though he spent time in prison, the story doesn't end there. Apparently, there have been more recent sightings.
Wait, seriously? Like, he's still out there?
That's what they say. People have reported seeing him still asking to touch their muscles. It's like this real-life boogeyman story that just won't go away.
And speaking of creepy figures that capture the imagination, our next deep dive takes us to the forests of Switzerland, where they've got their own mysterious figure haunting the woods. He's known as, wait for it, Le Loyon.
Loloyan is a fascinating case. Picture this. You're hiking through the beautiful Freiburg forest, right? Sun's dappling through the trees, birds are singing, and suddenly you come face to face with this figure in a vintage gas mask.
Okay, first of all, vintage gas mask. I'd be booking it out of there fast, and then you can say, boo. But you're saying this guy, he just wanders around the forest freaking people out.
Pretty much. But despite his, let's say, unique look, most reports describe Loloyan as harmless. He's not threatening anyone or hurting anyone, just walking, lost in his own world, I guess you could say.
Well, harmless or not, he still sounds creepy. What's with the gas mask anyway? Is he trying to make some kind of statement?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Nobody really knows. There was this one time, back in 2013, a Swiss newspaper actually published the first ever photo of Loloyan. One of the hikers managed to snap a picture.
Did that clear things up at all?
Not really. Not long after the photo went public, people found a bunch of clothes and this note, like a manifesto, titled The Death Certificate and Will of the Ghost.
Okay, the death certificate and will of the ghost. This just keeps getting weirder.
Tell me about it. And in the note, he basically says he's done. That the media ruined his happiness therapy, which was basically just him walking in the woods.
Wow, talk about craving anonymity. In this day and age, with everyone wanting to be famous on social media, this guy just wants to disappear. It makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, where's the line between harmless eccentricity and, well, something more unsettling?
Right, and what about the psychological impact of these encounters? Even if you try to rationalize it, tell yourself it's just your imagination, there's no denying that seeing something creepy, especially in the woods, it can really mess with your head. But we'll dive into that more after a quick break. Stay with us. Okay, so we're back, and I gotta say, that last one about Loloyon really got to me. I mean, this guy, he went to these crazy lengths just to be left alone. It's like he was trying to disappear completely.
It makes you think, doesn't it? In a world where everyone's trying to stand out, to be seen, he wanted the exact opposite.
It's kind of refreshing in a weird way. But speaking of strange encounters, our next story, this one takes creepy to a whole new level because it involves these unseen figures, things that people are seeing in the shadows.
Shadow people.
Yeah, shadow people. Okay, now I'm really intrigued, but I'm not going to lie, I'm already a little creeped out. So what exactly are we talking about here? Are these like ghosts?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Nobody really knows for sure. Some people think they're spirits, others say interdimensional beings, who knows? But what's wild is that people from all over the world, they're reporting seeing these things.
So it's not just some isolated thing. People from different cultures, different backgrounds, they're all seeing the shadow people.
And the descriptions, they're pretty similar too. People usually say it's like this dark human-shaped figure lurking in their peripheral vision, like to catch something out of the corner of your eye and poof, it's gone.
Okay, see, now that's just spooky. I don't know about you, but I've definitely had those moments where I thought I saw something move in a dark room, and then, it's just my imagination.
Oh, for sure. Our brains can play tricks on us, especially when we're tired, stressed, or in a new environment. And you know, some researchers actually think that some of these shadow people sightings, they could be explained by things like sleep paralysis.
Sleep paralysis. You mean where you wake up, but you can't move or talk.
Exactly. It's this weird in-between state. And during sleep paralysis, it's not uncommon to have hallucinations. Vivid ones, scary ones. So it's possible that some of these shadow people encounters, it's just our brains misfiring during those sleep transitions.
That's both fascinating and terrifying.
Yeah.
So our own minds are creating these mini horror movies. But what about the people who say they've seen these shadow people while they're wide awake? I mean, the video you sent, you mentioned this woman in Australia, right? She said she saw one standing at the foot of her bed in the middle of the night.
Yeah, that one was chilling. She said she felt this overwhelming sense of dread, but the figure, it just stood there watching her. And then, just like that, it vanished.
Okay, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. But if these shadow people, if they're not actually hurting anyone, why are we so afraid of them? What is it about seeing something so vague, so undefined, that's so unsettling?
I think it goes back to that fear of the unknown that we were talking about earlier. Our brains, they're hardwired to look for patterns to make sense of the world around us. When we see something that we can't immediately categorize, something that exists on the edge of our perception, it triggers a primal fear response.
So it's like we're afraid of what we don't understand, what we can't easily explain away.
Exactly. And that fear, that uncertainty, it's often what fuels these urban legends. We try to fill in the gaps in our understanding with stories, with explanations, even if those explanations are based more on, superstition than actual fact.
It's like the more we learn about the world, the more we realize how much we don't know. And sometimes it's those unknown spaces, those shadows, that really capture our imaginations. Okay, so we've covered shadow people, but this next one, this is a classic urban legend that I know a lot of people have heard about, the Bunny Man.
Now, before you picture some guy in a cute, cuddly rabbit costume, the Bunny Man is anything but adorable. We're talking about a figure dressed in a bunny suit, wielding an axe, who's supposedly been terrorizing the suburbs of Washington, D.C. for decades.
An axe-wielding bunny? Okay, that's both terrifying and kind of hilarious at the same time. But I'm guessing this legend, it has its roots in something a little more grounded in reality?
You're right. Like a lot of urban legends, the Bunny Man's origins are this weird mix of supposed historical events and, well, good old-fashioned storytelling. The video mentioned this incident back in 1970. A couple was parked near this bridge in Fairfax County, and they claimed that a man in a white suit, he yelled at them for trespassing and then chucked a hatchet at their car.
Talk about a close call.
Yeah.
Okay, but was he actually wearing a bunny costume, or did that detail get added later?
That's the thing. The couple never mentioned a bunny costume in their original story, just that the guy might have had something white on his head. But as the story spread, so did the bunny details.
Ah, the classic case of an urban legend evolving with each retelling. What about the axe, though? Is that real, or just another layer added to the story to make it scarier?
Well, that part, it seems like it might have some truth to it. See, back then, there was this guy named Douglas Griffin. He escaped from a mental institution, and supposedly, he developed a taste for rabbit stew while he was on the run. And guess what? He was known to carry a hatchet.
Okay, that's both sad and a little creepy. So you've got a real-life escapee with a taste for rabbit stew and a thing for carrying around a hatchet. It's easy to see how that story morphed into the Bunny Man legend we know today.
It's like the perfect recipe for an urban legend, right? And the craziest part is the legend is still going strong. The bridge where that original incident happened, people call it Bunny Man Bridge now. There are t-shirts, a horror movie franchise, even a Bunny Man beer.
Wow, this urban legend has definitely stood the test of time. It makes you wonder, what is it about these stories that capture our imagination so much? Why are we so drawn to the darker side of folklore?
I think it's because these stories, as crazy as they seem, they often tap into very real fears and anxieties. They're a way for us to confront the unknown, but within the safe confines of a story. It's like we get to experience that thrill of fear without actually being in any real danger.
That's a good point. And speaking of fear, our next story, this one takes us back down under to Australia. And this one's a real head scratcher. Forget haunted houses and creepy figures in the woods. This time, we're talking about something far more elusive, far more unsettling.
Yeah.
Shadow people.
Now, before we jump in, I have to say, this is one of those topics where the more you dig into it, the more questions you have. There's no easy answers here, just a lot of fascinating accounts and even more theories.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. Lay it on me. What are people saying about these shadow people?
Well, the reports are surprisingly consistent, even across cultures. People describe seeing these dark, shadowy figures, usually out of the corner of their eye. They're often described as being human-shaped, but without any, distinct features.
So not your friendly neighborhood ghost then, more like just shadows that move.
Kind of, but it's more than that. People who've encountered these shadow people, they talk about feeling this intense sense of dread, like they're being watched. It's like they're intruding on something they shouldn't be seeing.
Okay, that's giving me chills. But if they're just shadows, why are people so freaked out by them? I mean, what makes them scarier than just seeing, like, a weird-shaped tree in the dark?
I think it goes back to that fear of the unknown. Our brains are wired to recognize patterns, to make sense of the world, and when we see something that defies easy categorization, that exists on the edge of our perception, it triggers this primal fear response.
So it's not so much about what we're seeing, but what we're not seeing.
Exactly. It's that lack of detail, the ambiguity of these figures that lets our imaginations run wild. We start filling in the blanks with our own fears, our own anxieties, and that's what makes them so unsettling.
It's like the less we know, the scarier it becomes.
Yeah.
But what about explanations? Are there any, like, scientific theories out there about what these shadow people might be?
There are a few. Some researchers think that shadow people could be a weird side effect of sleep paralysis. Like we were talking about earlier. During sleep paralysis, hallucinations are super common and they can be pretty frightening.
So you're saying our brains could be playing tricks on us while we're stuck between being awake and asleep. That's both fascinating and terrifying.
I know, right? And while sleep paralysis could definitely explain some of these sightings, there are still plenty of people out there who believe that shadow people represent something more, something beyond our current understanding of, well, everything.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, some folks believe they're spirits of the dead. Others think they could be interdimensional beings, like they're crossing over from some other dimension. And then there's the whole extraterrestrial theory.
Wait, aliens? Like, they're here on Earth, hiding in the shadows, watching us.
Hey, it's a theory. And with something like shadow people, where there's so little concrete evidence, pretty much anything's possible.
So we've got ghosts, interdimensional beings, aliens. It's like a paranormal party.
Yeah.
But seriously, with so many theories out there, is there any way to know what's really going on?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Unfortunately, when it comes to shadow people, there are no easy answers, just more questions. And I think that's part of what makes this whole thing so fascinating. It forces us to confront the limits of our own understanding, to embrace the mystery, and to consider the possibility that there might be more to the world than meets the eye.
It's like that old saying, we fear what we don't understand. And when it comes to shadow people, there's definitely a lot we don't understand. But hey, maybe that's part of the appeal. The unknown, it has a way of captivating us, of reminding us that there are still mysteries out there waiting to be solved. And speaking of mysteries, our next urban legend takes us into the realm of the unexplained, the eerie, and the downright creepy. Get ready to explore the chilling legend of the Black-Eyed Children. Okay, Black-Eyed Children. Gotta say, this was new to me. What's the deal with these kids?
All right, so picture this. It's late, it's dark, stormy even, and you hear a knock on the door.
Okay, so far so good. I mean, not good, but,
You open the door, and there they are, two kids, boy and a girl, just standing there.
See, this is where I'd be like, nope, and slam the door shut.
But they look so normal, pale, maybe a little too calm for the situation. But the thing that really gets you, it's their eyes.
The eyes are the window to the soul, or so they say.
These kids, their eyes, they're completely black. No whites, no pupils, just pure darkness.
Okay, yeah, nope, 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 that's way too creepy for me.
Yeah.
But are they, like, actually dangerous? Do they hurt people?
That's the thing. There aren't any, verified reports of them hurting anyone. But people who've encountered these kids, they talk about this intense feeling of dread, almost a pressure to let them in. It's really unsettling.
Oh, I bet. It's like you're messing with your head. But why kids? It just seems extra creepy to me.
Right. It plays on that whole thing of children representing innocence. Seeing kids, it usually makes people feel safe, not terrified.
It's like that saying, sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones that look the least monstrous. So, what's the verdict? Demons? Aliens? Or just some elaborate prank?
Honestly, nobody knows. There are tons of theories floating around, but no real answers. That's the thing about urban legends. They thrive on mystery.
Well, I gotta say, we've covered some seriously strange and creepy stuff today. Haunted houses, muscle-obsessed men, shadow people, and now black-eyed children. We've really gone down the rabbit hole in this one.
Tell me about it. But hey, that's what makes these urban legends so fascinating, right? They remind us that there are still mysteries out there, things we can't explain.
True that. And sometimes it's those unexplained mysteries that really capture the imagination. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. A big thanks to our listener for sending us that video. It was definitely food for thought. And to everyone listening, thanks for coming along on this wild ride.
Until next time, keep your eyes peeled, your minds open, and maybe, just maybe, leave the porch light off tonight. You never know who might be knocking.
Ooh, good advice. And on that note, we'll see you all next time for another deep dive into the strange, the unusual, and the downright unbelievable.